Some federal judges across the country are getting increasingly upset with the Trump administration for not complying with their orders in cases involving immigrants. The New York Times reports, quote, at least 35 times since August, federal judges have ordered the administration to explain why it should not be punished for violating their orders in immigration cases. For instance, one judge ordered an immigrant be released from custody in Minnesota, but instead the man was let go in El Paso. The Times says this has come up multiple times in California, Texas, Florida, Massachusetts, Michigan, New York, West Virginia, and Puerto Rico. Former federal judge Jeremy Fogel joins us now. He is currently the executive director of the Berkeley Judicial Institute at Cal Berkeley's Law School. Judge, thank you so much for being here. What recourse, if any, do judges have? Does holding someone in contempt really have teeth?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be with you. The contempt power is a very rarely exercised power. You know, the public sometimes thinks contempt is something judges.
Now here's where things get really interesting. The federal judiciary appears to have had enough of being brushed aside by Trump and his team, and they are no longer being subtle about it. Judges are escalating fast, using contempt proceedings, daily fines, and show cause orders to make clear that defiance will carry real consequences. They are drawing a hard line and openly signaling that the next step could be handcuffs. Yes, jail time is now part of the conversation. The courts have gone into full enforcement mode, and the Trump administration is scrambling to respond to a judicial branch that seems to have decided it will not be ignored any longer.
Now to the Trump administration, firing 8 more immigration judges. Jay O'Brien is in Washington with the details. And Jay, there have been more than 100 fired or resigning since last spring.
Exactly right, George. Overnight, the Trump administration announcing that it's fired 8 immigration judges working in New York City, according to the National Association of Immigration Judges. These firings, as you say, are part of a continued gutting of immigration courts from coast to coast. More than 100 immigration judges who review asylum claims and rule on other critical cases have been fired or resigned since last spring, the union says. It comes as the administration is trying to accelerate deportations nationwide and is pausing the processing of nearly all asylum claims in the wake of last week's shooting of National Guard troops by an Afghan national. And this morning, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is saying that she's pushing President Trump to expand the administration's current travel ban to include several more unnamed countries. This summer, the administration banned or restricted travel.
So let's dive into the latest from the Trump administration, which has now fired 8 more immigration judges in New York City. That adds to a much bigger purge. Since last spring, more than 100 immigration judges have either been fired or pushed out. According to the National Association of Immigration Judges, this is part of a broader effort to remake the immigration courts, speed up deportations, and freeze almost all asylum claims. It comes amid a wider hardline turn that has included incidents like the shooting of National Guard troops by an Afghan national and new pressure from Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to expand the travel ban to more unnamed countries. But the bigger picture is far more serious than one bad day in one courtroom. What we are watching now is a nationwide collision between the judiciary and an administration that appears to treat court orders as optional. Since August of last year, judges across the country have issued at least 35 orders demanding that the Trump administration explain why it should not be sanctioned or held in contempt for violating court directives. That is extraordinary. It means judges have repeatedly had to ask the government, in effect, why it should not be punished for breaking the law, and these are not minor disputes over interpretation. In case after case, courts have issued clear orders: stop a deportation, release a detainee, preserve someone's legal rights, and the government has done the opposite anyway. Much of this is happening in immigration cases where judges have ordered deportations halted or individuals released, only to see the administration ignore those directives outright. A Minnesota case captures the pattern perfectly. A federal judge ordered that an immigrant be released, using plain language that left no room for confusion. Instead of complying, the government put the man on a plane and sent him more than 1,000 miles away to Texas. That was not bureaucratic sloppiness. It was a deliberate choice to override a judicial order. Judges are responding with visible anger. In that Minnesota case, the judge held the government in contempt and made clear that under Donald Trump, the administration had broken the law by defying the court. The warning was explicit. If this continues, The consequences could include heavy fines and even jail time for officials involved. And Minnesota is not some isolated example. In New Jersey alone, the Justice Department has admitted to 52 violations of court orders. That number matters. 52 violations in one state, in roughly 2 months, is not the mark of an administration struggling with legal complexity. It suggests a government making a choice to treat judges as obstacles instead of co-equal constitutional actors. Judges in New Jersey have noticed, and they are escalating, hauling senior Justice Department officials into court and warning that contempt, financial penalties, and even criminal consequences are now on the table. Then there is Judge James Boasberg, who has become central to this broader showdown. He has revived contempt proceedings over the administration's deportation practices and holds unusually powerful enforcement tools. He can impose escalating daily fines, he can launch criminal contempt proceedings, and if the government keeps defying the court, specific officials could face prosecution or imprisonment. This is no longer just about money. The threat of handcuffs is real, and Boasberg has made clear he is prepared to use the judiciary's full authority if the pattern continues. What makes this even more dangerous for the White House is that it is happening in public. Show cause orders are public. Contempt findings are public. Warnings about possible imprisonment are made in open court, with cameras and reporters recording every word. Trump cannot simply bury this under social media attacks on judges. His usual political playbook does not work inside a courtroom, and that is the key point his team seems unable to accept. Court orders are binding. It does not matter how many angry posts appear on Truth Social or how loudly the White House cries political bias. In court, defiance does not look strong. It looks willful, and the more willful it looks, the harsher the penalties can become. Trump seems to understand that, which is why his administration is now scrambling behind the scenes. Government lawyers are being dragged into urgent compliance meetings. Agency officials are being warned they could face personal liability, and the Department of Justice is stuck in the humiliating position of having to explain to judges why promises of compliance keep collapsing. That credibility problem is becoming its own crisis. Every time government attorneys assure a judge that an order will be followed and the government then violates it, the administration burns more trust. Once that trust is gone, judges become far less willing to give the government the benefit of the doubt in future cases. That means every new filing, every new request, and every new claim from the administration enters a courtroom under a cloud of suspicion. To understand how serious this is, it helps to look at what a show cause order actually means. It is not a casual warning. When a federal judge issues one, the court is saying there is already evidence that the government may have violated an order, and unless it can come in and justify itself, contempt sanctions may follow. That can mean fines, penalties, and in the most severe cases, criminal consequences. Judges do not issue these lightly, especially not against a presidential administration. For 35 of them to be issued since August, across different states and different courts, shows something much deeper than partisan conflict. It shows a broad judicial conclusion that the law is being openly disregarded. And in immigration cases, that defiance has real human consequences. These are not abstract docket disputes. People have been deported despite orders designed to protect them. Some have been sent back to countries where they faced danger or death. Others have been moved far away from their families and lawyers even after courts said they should be released or remain where they were. Every one of those 52 violations in New Jersey involved a real person whose rights were overridden because federal officials decided the court could be ignored. That is why this has become a constitutional crisis, not just an immigration fight. The judiciary exists to check the executive branch. If the executive can simply choose which court orders to obey, then the basic structure of constitutional government starts to break down. What is happening now is not a law school abstraction. It is a live test of whether the courts still have meaningful authority over a president who acts as if the rules are for other people. The conflict also turns personal when it comes to Trump himself. Judge Juan Merchan in New York has already fined Trump directly for violating gag order rules and warned that future violations could bring jail time. That is no small thing. It means a sitting president is being told by a judge that continued defiance could result in incarceration. Trump's legal and political world has long operated on the assumption that the presidency insulates him from normal judicial consequences. Judges are now signaling that they do not accept that premise. And if Merchan were ever to impose jail for another violation, it would trigger one of the most explosive confrontations between the executive and judicial branches in modern U.S. history. Legal experts largely agree he would have the authority to do it. That is what makes these warnings so dangerous for Trump. They are not empty threats. They are grounded in actual judicial power. Step back, and the pattern is unmistakable. 35 show-cause orders, 52 admitted violations in New Jersey, a contempt finding in Minnesota, revived contempt proceedings before Boasberg, and direct warnings from Merchan. This is not random turbulence. It is a coordinated institutional reaction by judges who appear to have concluded that patience, deference, and ordinary warnings are no longer enough. That reaction carries real consequences. First, contempt proceedings can move toward criminal exposure. Judges hold contempt power precisely because it cannot be brushed aside by executive politics. Trump cannot simply tweet it away, and the White House cannot make it disappear through messaging. Second, daily fines and sanctions create intense pressure inside the administration, especially on career lawyers and officials who do not want to lose their licenses, their finances, or their freedom protecting unlawful conduct. Third, every contempt finding becomes part of the public record, and that matters on Capitol Hill, where Democrats can use those rulings as evidence of systemic lawbreaking, obstruction, and abuse of power. It also changes how future executive actions will be received. For a long time, the administration operated as if it could launch sweeping policies first and fight the courts later, stretching out appeals while the policy stayed in place. That strategy depended on a slow-moving judiciary. What we are seeing now is the opposite: judges moving faster, watching more closely, and showing they are willing to punish defiance in real time. That means the cost of non-compliance may now be higher than the cost of backing down. Politically, this is deeply damaging for Trump. He has spent years cultivating the image of a strong man who controls every institution around him, but the picture now is the reverse. Federal judges calmly issuing orders, dragging officials back into court, stacking penalties higher, and making clear that the administration cannot even manage basic compliance with the law. Every contempt finding feeds the broader story of lawlessness. Every fine reinforces the image of an administration operating outside the rules. And this has another effect inside government. When officials watch colleagues get summoned to court, threatened with sanctions, or exposed to possible jail time, they become less willing to carry out questionable orders. In that sense, this judicial backlash is not only punishing past defiance, it is deterring future defiance by making the personal risk impossible to ignore. There is also a broader institutional development here. Judges are not isolated from one another. They read each other's opinions, follow each other's cases, and understand when a common threat is emerging. What appears to be taking shape now is a cross-ideological recognition among judges appointed by both parties that the Trump administration poses a direct challenge to judicial authority itself. This is no longer about ordinary political disagreement. It is about whether court orders still mean what they say. That kind of judicial solidarity is dangerous for Trump because it makes it much harder to game the system by relying on a favorable judge here or there. Even judges who may agree with parts of the administration's policy goals are showing less tolerance for open contempt toward the courts. The message is becoming unmistakable. The rule of law is not optional. Court orders are not suggestions, and no president gets to place himself above the federal judiciary. Trump has long acted as though every institution trying to restrain him could be mocked, bullied, or ignored into submission. What the courts are now showing is that this one cannot, and they are proving it one contempt warning, one sanction, and one show-cause order at a time.
I'm going to show you two photos of former Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew attended various parties with Jeffrey Epstein. Under the law Congress passed, you were allowed to redact photos to protect the victims of Epstein's sex trafficking operation. You redacted the photos of this victim's face because you were following the congressional law. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, that we redacted the victim's
Because you were
face?
following the congressional law, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You have now established that please put the photos back up, that we are looking at a sex trafficking victim.
Let me show you a couple of photos of Prince Andrew, who was known to appear at parties hosted by Jeffrey Epstein. Congress passed a law allowing photos in the Epstein sex trafficking case to be redacted in order to protect victims' identities, so a victim's face was blurred in those images under that rule. And to be clear, that part was done properly, but then the photos go back up, and suddenly you realize you are looking at a sex trafficking victim. That is where this story starts to spiral. This situation is getting truly wild, the kind of wild that can destroy careers, trigger a criminal investigation, and badly damage the credibility of the Department of Justice. Right now, Attorney General Pam Bondi is at the center of it. Democrats in Congress are accusing her of lying under oath about Donald Trump's name appearing in the Epstein files, and they are now pushing for a special counsel to investigate whether she committed perjury. On February 24, 2026, Ted Lieu and Dan Goldman sent a formal letter to the Justice Department asking for exactly that. And this is not some vague accusation driven by partisan anger. It comes directly from what happened in public, during the hearing, in full view of the country. Bondi sat there, raised her right hand, swore to tell the truth, and told Congress there was no evidence in the Epstein files showing Trump committed any crime. But moments later, Congressman Lieu pulled out actual DOJ documents and showed the committee, and the cameras, that Trump's name appeared repeatedly in tips, memos, and allegations, not once or twice, but over and over again. And even after seeing those documents, Bondi refused to change her answer. She looked at the evidence and still insisted her testimony stood. That is what makes this so hard to ignore. The Attorney General of the United States, the country's top law enforcement official, was sitting before Congress saying there was no evidence while a congressman was literally holding documents in front of her that said otherwise. That is not just a difference of interpretation. Either she failed to review the material she is responsible for, or something much more serious is going on. And that is exactly why Democrats are now calling for a criminal investigation.
I want to discuss another man, Donald Trump, who is all over the Epstein files, like former Prince. Here's a video. Like former Prince Andrew, Donald Trump attended various parties with Jeffrey Epstein. I want to know, were there any underage girls at that party or at any party that Trump attended with Jeffrey Epstein?
This is so ridiculous, and that they are trying to deflect from all the great things Donald Trump has done. There is no evidence.
What's striking is that there still is no solid evidence behind a lot of the viral claims floating around online. Social media is full of videos about Pam Bondi supposedly being caught removing evidence from a courthouse or being threatened with jail by a judge. Those clips have pulled in millions of views, but the creators themselves label them as fictional dramatizations. They are scripted entertainment, not real courtroom events. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But the reason those fake videos are spreading so fast is that the real story is already explosive enough on its own. The sitting Attorney General is being accused by members of Congress of lying under oath about Donald Trump's presence in the Epstein files. That is the real headline. At a House Judiciary Committee hearing on the DOJ's Epstein records, thousands of pages of tips, memos, internal summaries, and logged allegations tied to one of the biggest sex trafficking cases in modern American history, Bondi was confronted in real time with documents showing that Trump's name appears repeatedly in the files. Not as some buried footnote, but in tips, memos, and DOJ-prepared summaries that are now part of the public record. Now, to be precise, unverified material is not proof, and it does not mean Trump has been charged or found guilty of anything. But it does mean the information existed, was documented, and was serious enough to be included in federal investigative files. So when Bondi testified under oath that there was no evidence linking Trump to crimes in the Epstein matter, members of the committee immediately challenged her with the DOJ's own records. Those files included a DOJ presentation summarizing an allegation from a woman who said Trump assaulted her, along with a witness account describing Epstein introducing a young woman to Trump and commenting on her appearance. That is what made the hearing so remarkable. Ted Lieu did not ask a vague question and let Bondi dodge. He had the documents in front of him, walked through them on camera, pointed to the DOJ presentation and witness accounts, and asked how she could still claim there was no evidence. Bondi, even with the same documents in front of her, refused to retreat. She stood by her testimony. That moment is what triggered the formal push for a special counsel. Lieu and Dan Goldman were not simply debating legal wording. They were accusing the Attorney General of making a sworn statement that directly clashed with her own department's files. If her testimony under oath does not match what those documents show, that raises the question of perjury, lying to Congress, which is a serious federal offense. That is why the letter they sent to the Justice Department matters. It was not a press stunt or a symbolic complaint. It was a formal request for a special counsel to investigate whether Bondi lied under oath. And the reason they want a special counsel is obvious. Bondi runs the DOJ. Asking the department to investigate its own attorney general would be like asking someone to grade their own exam. Whether the current DOJ will appoint an independent investigator is another matter, and under this administration, that seems unlikely. But the request is now part of the official record. It creates a paper trail that cannot simply disappear and could be revived later if Congress changes hands or a future administration chooses to act. Bondi's past only makes the current crisis worse. Long before this hearing, there were already questions about whether she had a pattern of protecting Trump. As Florida Attorney General, she came under scrutiny after the Trump Foundation made an illegal political donation to a group supporting her while her office was weighing action against Trump University. Bondi denied any connection, but the optics never went away. So now, when she appears before Congress and says there is no evidence against Trump, even though the DOJ's own files point the other way, critics are not seeing an isolated misstatement. They are seeing a pattern. At the same time, social media is making the whole situation more confusing. Dramatic YouTube videos showing Bondi supposedly stealing evidence, being arrested, or threatened with jail are spreading everywhere. They look polished and convincing, but they are fiction. The danger is that Bondi's defenders can point to those fake clips and dismiss everything as internet nonsense. But the actual hearing, the released DOJ documents, Bondi's sworn testimony, and the formal request for a criminal investigation are all real. None of that vanishes just because fictional videos are getting clicks, and that is what makes this so serious. Bondi is not just facing a bad news cycle. She is facing a genuine credibility crisis with possible legal consequences. If a special counsel is ever appointed, or if a future administration reopens the issue, she could be pulled into a formal criminal investigation over whether she lied to Congress in one of the most politically sensitive cases in the country. The damage also goes beyond Bondi herself. When the Attorney General stands before Congress and makes statements that appear to contradict her own department's documents, it hits the credibility of the Justice Department as a whole. The public is supposed to believe that the Attorney General serves the law, not the President personally. If people conclude that the nation's top law enforcement official is bending the truth to shield Trump, trust in the DOJ's independence starts to collapse. So while the internet is busy sharing fictional courtroom drama, the real story is already extraordinary. A sitting attorney general, sworn testimony under scrutiny, DOJ files that appear to contradict her, a formal request for a special counsel, and a long-running pattern of questions about her independence where Trump is concerned. That is more than enough on its own. And if this moves forward, every word Bondi said under oath is going to be examined line by line.